Very well, thanks for dropping by. Off you go.
So one of Cameron's Patreon members, Charlie Brewer, discovered this article from June 1st, 2012, about Lucasfilm naming Kathleen Kennedy as co-chair and successor to George Lucas. Now, it's been speculated on that particular thread that George had a massive health scare and decided to retire. That's not what happened. He wanted to expand the business in Marion County, and he couldn't get them to allow him to do it. So he said, fuck it, I'll do something else. And I think around this time is when he decided to start looking for a buyer for Lucasfilm. And he basically elbowed out Rick McCallum and Micheline Chow. So here's the day that George sold his baby to Disney, Bob Iger with that Cheshire Cat grin, and George, doing the Anakin Skywalker, my God, what have I done, what have I done, what have I done? But this story is an old one, and I want to say that there was a lot of you've got to be kidding me going on in Hollywood, because Kennedy's reputation had taken a hit. Then, due to the fact that several of her movies had failed, her husband, when she produced with her husband, Benjamin Button, Seabiscuit, which I have a problem with because the horse War Admiral was Seabiscuit's nephew or uncle. War Admiral was a son of Man of War. Seabiscuit was a grandson of Man of War. And War Admiral was actually smaller than Seabiscuit. So the whole, they didn't follow the history, which bothers me greatly. It's still a good movie. Shows a lot of really great horse racing moments, but as far as being true to this story, it wasn't. And there were some other good movies that she produced with her husband at Kennedy Marshall. But when she left, when she went to be co-chair of Lucasfilm, she left the Kennedy Marshall company to her husband to run. And have they even really had anything lately that's been notable? I mean, since this happened, no. So how did this happen? How did Kathleen Kennedy get to where she got? Well, a long time ago, there were three young film students, Steven Spielberg, John Milius, and George Lucas. And Steven Spielberg made a name for himself making Jaws, and then made Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Kathleen Kennedy also noticed that George Lucas made Star Wars. And they were connected, they were friends. They were part of the little hatchling group that Francis Ford Coppola shepherded around the Warner Brothers lot. And when Coppola ran to Northern California, George went with him. So Kathy shows up, there she is on one side. I'm focusing on Melissa Matheson. After quitting her job in radio, a radio producer for a talk show in San Diego, and she drives up to Los Angeles, couch surfs on her sister's sofa till she got a job with John Milius as his assistant. Then she was introduced to Steven Spielberg, who hired her away from him. And the thing about this is a picture from E.T., I think the Oscars, or no, the premiere maybe. And Melissa Matheson, who was dating Harrison Ford at the time, is in this photo. And I want to concentrate on her because if you want to talk about women in Hollywood with talent, Melissa Matheson she was brilliant and a gentle soul. Okay, so Kennedy gets hooked up with Spielberg. And here she is, I think this is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And she was his assistant on this. She met her husband, Frank Marshall, on the set. Or maybe they met before then, I'm not sure. But this was where she went from being the step-and-fetch-it to actually kind of doing things for movies. And, of course, here's George with Kathy and Frank on the set of Temple of Doom. I have to say that when you look at how she networked, it wasn't because she was good at any of this. She just knew whose ass to kiss. She kissed Milius's ass, who in turn introduced her to Spielberg, which was her dream. And here she is with Steven on the set of Empire of the Sun with little boy there, Christian Bale. She was introduced then to George Lucas, and she basically got herself into that cabal of that young talent that showed up from the LA film schools and took over from the golden age producers and directors that were either retiring or dying off, and there were middle ground like William Friedkin, etc. She was producer on Schindler's List. Look at the defensive pose in response to Liam Neeson towering over her. Okay, Kennedy is an interesting thing because you would never, ever believe she could be, I think, as resentful as she is. But let me go through this. So the article from the Deadline was basically kind of mystified about why she got this job. I'm going to read this a little bit here. Lucasfilm names Kathleen Kennedy co-chair as successor to George Lucas. Breaking, Kathleen Kennedy has been named co-chair of Lucasfilm. Founder George Lucas will become co-chair of the company's board and stay on as CEO. As part of the deal, 7-time Oscar nominee Kennedy will step down from her post as co-head of the Kennedy Marshall Company production company, leaving it to Frank Marshall to run. The move seems a bit bizarre. Kennedy Marshall days ago made an overall TV deal at CBS, and Kennedy has produced big Steven Spielberg films, while Marshall has the Bourne Identity, Bourne Legacy coming. Lucas, by comparison, has mostly continued to find ways to squeeze revenue out of his so-called tired franchise. But he seems veering off towards retirement or making personal films the way his pal Francis Ford Coppola does now. Lucas has all the money he needs, but it seems unclear exactly what Kennedy will be running. We are unable to get clarity on what will happen to Lucasfilm or Kennedy Marshall. As we were told, Kennedy would be unavailable to speak to Deadline. Kennedy Marshall has a first-look deal, Steven Spielberg at DreamWorks, and sources say they expect it to be business as usual under Marshall. But Kennedy used to be one of the smartest producers in town, though her recent movies have underperformed at the box office to the detriment of her reputation. Nevertheless, the loss may have an impact.
Oh, she's horrible. I've made a ghastly mistake.
The time has come. Execute Order 66.
Here's one of the outtakes. Kennedy said, George and I have talked about the enormous opportunities that lie ahead for the company, and as George moves towards retirement, I am honored that he trusts me with taking care of the beloved film franchises. Kennedy said in the release that just went out. Here it is in full. Lucasfilm Limited today announced that Kathleen Kennedy will become co-chair of Lucasfilm. In an effort to move forward with his retirement plans, George will work with Kathleen Kennedy to transition into her new role. Lucas will become co-chairman of the board and continue as CEO. Micheline Chow will remain as president and COO of Lucasfilm and continue to focus on the day-to-day operations of the business. I'm going to tell you guys something. They did not mention Rick McCallum in this. So this is the thing. So I want to say something. Even back then, Hollywood itself wondered out loud what the actual fuck was going on at Lucasfilm. Okay, these are the questions that need to be asked. All right, these are the questions. Okay, and when George said, so for me, Kathy was the obvious choice. She is a trusted friend. Don't laugh. And one of the most respected producers and executives in the industry. Director Steven Spielberg said, George's prescience is once again proven by his choice of my longtime producing partner, Kathy Kennedy. Now, rumor has it, Steven Spielberg doesn't talk to her anymore. Basically, I don't think they understood the resentment this woman built up against them since the day she drove up from San Diego with ambitions of connecting with Spielberg some way and basically becoming a producer behind the scenes, behind the camera, person like him. The thing about it is both Spielberg and Lucas thought she was their friend, thought she would protect what they loved, their franchises, and she did not. And they learned a critical lesson here. You don't know a person till they get power. Okay, power can be a corrupting influence, and with, I think, the resentment she built up for George and Steven, I think it was what happened. I think that the moment she was actually given the keys to the kingdom, when George finally sold Lucasfilm to Disney, and got lucky with one movie, TFA, which is a terrible movie, by the way. That's what occurred. And the fact of the matter is, the weird contract she's got reflects the fact that George actually trusted this woman. And again, he didn't know who she was until she got power over what he created. Okay? And that, I think, is the bottom line. I believe that she spent a lot of time in San Francisco, not as much time as she should have. She did not know what they were doing up there. And the fact of the matter is, Lucasfilm being so disconnected from her home base in Burbank, because that's where the headquarters are, so she had to go up there. But if the boss isn't there all the time and isn't inclined to be, the mice will play, but that's her fault, okay? She wasn't willing to absolutely dive into it. You can do a VTC every day, but that's not going to keep you abreast of the office chemistry and how, your executives are behaving and working in that environment. And Lucasfilm, to me, when you think about who's working there and who has worked there, Justin Bolger, and Pablo is still there, allegedly. you kind of like, there's a reason why they got away with what they got away with. She wasn't there every day, okay? She was, because there are Lucasfilm employees down in Burbank. So all 70 of them walked out at noon during the Don't Say Gay riot or whatever walkout they put out. They did. It's very interesting to me how that played out not very well. So there is, it's if she had to split her time, she wasn't, and she's not. If she had to split her time, she did a bad job of it, okay? Because she couldn't be on top of everything. And that's part of her weakness, okay? And I think the worst of the worst happened in San Francisco. Even though Matt Martin is based in Los Angeles, okay? So I want you guys to get this story. I'll link it in the description. And it's very interesting. Hollywood almost predicted that this was a bad move. A bizarre move is what they called it in Deadline. This is Steph signing out. I'll see you around the galaxy.